We have many orders of business we have to attend today, so I'm going to try and make it quick. Seeing as how I'm the only one out of the 5 awesome Twilighters that seems to actually enjoy classic books, I guess I will answer my own question, okay? Recapping on what we learned last week. Now, if you have read Twilight as many times as I have, you may recall that all of these authors were mentioned in Twilight. When Bella first comes to Forks and starts off high school, she's in her English class and she's reading off the syllabus for the rest of the year. And she's like reading it off in her mind and she's like, oh, Shakespeare, Chaucer, Faulkner, Bronte. I've read all of these. This is going to be a piece of cake. And also randomly in Twilight, she was reading Wuthering Heights for school and she was like, oh, I've read this a billion times. I'm going to ace that quiz. Shaw. 2 of those authors, Bronte and Shakespeare, have been used already. As we know, Breaking Dawn has A Midsummer's Night Dream and one other novel. And A Midsummer's Night Dream is written by Shakespeare. So based on that knowledge, you might guess the only 2 authors she hasn't used that she's mentioned in Twilight are Geoffrey Chaucer and William Faulkner. But I'm thinking those 2 are pretty unlikely candidates, seeing as how neither of them write chick lit, which has been basically the foundation of the series. And since she used Shakespeare twice, I'm going to assume that she could use Bronte twice. Now, if you know anything about classic books, you will know that there is more than one Bronte. In fact, there were 3 of them. There were Emily, Charlotte, and Anne. So the book that I think is the most likely candidate for number 2 of the Breaking Dawn inspirations would be Jane Eyre, which is written by Charlotte Bronte. Now, if you're not familiar with the storyline of Jane Eyre, I will try and sum it up for you. Jane Eyre, she's poor, she's an orphan, she's miserable, and her stepmom hates her. Oh, it's not her stepmom, sorry, I was thinking of Cinderella. It's like her aunt or somebody. Yeah, so Aunt sends her off to boarding school, and then after boarding school she becomes a teacher at the boarding school. After she's done teaching, she goes to Thornfield, which is where Mr. Rochester lives. And if you don't know already, Edward Rochester is where Edward Cullen gets his name. She's a tutor for Edward Rochester's illegitimate child. Rochester's rich, he's also moody. He's also really odd because he dresses up as a gypsy to get Jane to confess that she likes him. Edward falls in love with Jane, Jane falls in love with Edward, they get engaged, and before they get married, a devastating twist of events happens in which we find out that Edward Rochester's already married to this evil woman who's insane and is locked up in like one of the cellars of his mansion. So Jane naturally is crushed. And you know what she does? She leaves Mr. Rochester. Bad things happen. She goes to live with her cousin or something. Her cousin proposes 2 things to her at once. 1, they move to Africa, and 2, they get married. And then Jane's like, well, I don't really want to settle for someone I don't really love. And by now she's gotten some money from an inheritance or something. And so she goes back, and Rochester's mansion has burned down, his wife is dead, and he's blind. So now she has the upper hand. And so now she marries him. The end. Why I think this would be a very good inspiration for Breaking Dawn is because throughout the entire Twilight series, Bella has repeatedly talked about how the relationship between her and Edward are unequal. What's very possible in Breaking Dawn is that she finds a way to make their relationship equal, aka becoming a vampire and not being such a klutz. That is sort of similar to what happens in Jane Eyre. Jane, even though she's poor and a servant, marrying Edward Rochester, who's rich and a landowner, would naturally cause an unequal relationship, and Jane doesn't want to live like that. Jane refuses to be subjected to her husband's domination. And that's part of why Jane leaves, because she wouldn't want that, and she wouldn't want to be technically considered a mistress since he was already married. She leaves because she would rather fight for equality and love rather than just a guilty pleasure. So I think that is similar to what could happen in Breaking Dawn. Also, Bella might have some competition. Edward Rochester has 2 women. In Eclipse, I believe the Denali clan and Tanya were referred to. They were talking about how so many females showed an interest in Edward, and I think one of them might turn up and play a bigger role in Breaking Dawn, which I think would be very, very just, because Edward has been very patient with Bella and Jacob, and now Bella, it's her turn to feel the heat. Whew, God, that analysis was long. Okay, down to the second order of business. Our discussion question for this week, which is about the fate of Jacob Black. A lot of people have expressed their desire for him to imprint on someone else, which I think would be alright, but if he ends up imprinting on some random werewolf he found in Canada, I think that would be just really out of place. I would love it if he and Leah got together, because I honestly love Leah as a character. I think she's very interesting, and even though she's a vindictive bitch, I think she's kind of the most believable out of all the female characters. I think it would be cool if they got together, but the possibility of them imprinting on each other is impossible because, as Stephanie Meyer has stated before, it happens upon first sight, and they've seen each other already. No can do. If he imprints upon a vampire, I think that would be, I guess, a nice way to wrap up the vampire-werewolf feud, but I don't think that's very likely because he told Bella he'd rather her be dead than a vampire. What I think is most likely, and would not be a bad ending, is that Jacob dies for Bella, and that way he doesn't interfere in their relationship anymore, but his love for her is not sullied in any way. It would make a nice ending because it would make him self-sacrificing in the end, and really it would make him a good character, other than just a selfish little brat that wants to screw up Edward and Bella's relationship. That would not be a bad ending. I think that would be alright if Jacob dies. Did I mention that I hate Jacob Black? Will Jacob show up at the wedding? I hope not, but it's a possibility. I don't think she'll do it to milk it for more drama, you know, between the whole triangle Edward, Bella, Jacob thing, because that's already played out in Eclipse. If he does show up at the wedding, I think it would be more of a reconciliation kind of thing, being like, I accept Bella and Edward being together, I accept you two, I give you my blessing, that type of feel-good stuff. And finally, on the subject of Jacob Black, even though this was just about the fate of him in Breaking Dawn, I thought I would expand this a little more to just Jacob Black in general. I personally despise his character, Jacob Black, but watching some recent MTV interviews with Taylor Lautner, the actor who plays him, I've discovered that I love the actor. I think Taylor Lautner is adorable and so upbeat and funny and happy, and his smile is dazzling. And I really enjoy watching him come on screen and talk because he's very energetic and lovely. I think that's a good thing because that is kind of the way Jacob is described by Bella, like her personal son. If I were a Jacob fan, I think he would be the perfect guy to play Jacob because he's like Jacob minus the whiny, manipulative, selfish crybaby. I like Taylor Lautner so much that after seeing the movie, I might end up liking Jacob Black. I don't know, but I think that's definitely a possibility. I like him so much. And so I will show you a clip.
It surprised me, when they didn't have, the crazy teeth. But I actually like that, because, it's not like crazy, like they have, these teeth and they just, I mean, yeah, they want blood, but they're not just, like these freaky characters. I love how there's the good ones and the bad ones, there's the evil ones who do want that. And then there's also the Cullens, who realize, that's bad and they're more human-like. And so I definitely love the good and the bad side. So that's, probably my favorite part with the vampire.
I just might end up using a clip in every single video that I make, so watch out for that. Back to Taylor Lautner. I think he is adorable, and a lot of people after seeing that interview were like, he said 5 million times and that's annoying, but I personally find that really, really cute because I do that too. And before 5 Awesome Twilighters, I never filmed myself, so I didn't know that I did that, and yeah, so I realized that I say all the time without meaning to, and it's annoying, and I was like, oh my god, Taylor Lautner does that too. That is so adorable. So that made me happy. He makes me happy. Third order of business. Due to the recent overuse of Shannon's word jubilant, I've decided to lay off the word and instead call my own word. I call the word elated. Elated is mine, bitches. None of you take it, okay?